So I want to thank you all for coming together in person and for those of you joining us by Zoom to spend a little time in which we can look at the many ways that Naropa is serving the world. There are few, I think, if any times that we gather where traumas of various kinds are very far removed from our experience. For a few years, the conversation was framed by the pandemic and the Marshall Fires of 2021. Today, COVID still hovers around with ongoing uncertainty, and those in our community impacted by the Marshall Fires remain aware of that event daily as they continue to rebuild, freshly reminded by the very recent destruction in LA with its own direct impact on members of our extended community. I will say, I don't know if there's been a story about Peter and Cynthia, but I will say, if you haven't read the story online from the Denver Gazette about Kelly and her family and living in their RV, as the journey continues from the fires, I would encourage you to do that. I wasn't sure how to start, but I'm going to just rip the Band-Aid off because the questions that have been coming to me for the last month or so have been mostly about federal policy, Washington, the president, the election, and I figured rather than embed it somewhere, let's just deal with it. I will confess that by the time I finished writing this piece, I was pretty grumpy. So we'll see where the rest of it goes. But in any case, we're just going to do it, all right? Without question, the effects of the recent presidential election are just becoming alive for us. I'll speak about some of the specifics shortly, but I want to note that we're at a place where there are more questions than answers and more fear than hope. If we check with the essential teachings of mindfulness, awareness, compassion, and impermanence, we can say that this won't be the case forever, not diminishing, however, the confusion and the concern that we're holding in a bigger container, a container where we can approach our own fears and those of our community with equanimity and confidence as we find our way through. And I guess I can say I am confident that we will find our way through. I can't tell you what that's going to look like, but I think that is going to be the path that we walk. Naming the challenges and committing to do our part to create the conditions for change is extremely important, and it's really what Naropa is about. 6 months ago, we held the fall semester convocation in this space, and as I've done at every convocation since the first one in 2012, maybe that was my last convocation, I don't know. I made reference to the anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington and Dr. King's profound explication of the times and our obligations. Since that time, the U.S. has experienced what may be a sea change in public and social policy, testing all our skills and commitment to serving as compassionate, sentient beings. And so as a result, I've been reflecting 6 months later on Dr. King's words, which to me, they serve as a spiritual reminder, and I just want to refer to them again briefly today. Actions to enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion in our civil society are under attack by some with the view that they weaken some version of what it means to be a member of that society. But to me, no amount of sarcasm or misplaced view that competence and quality is at odds with diversity and inclusion can refute the fact of a shameful and violent 400-year history in this country of enslavement in the West, labeled by Martin Luther King as withering injustice. And without diminishing that fact of Western enslavement, the truth of injustice also holds as recently the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi death camps was commemorated, or as the Israelis and Palestinians, both peoples sharing generational trauma of oppression as both victims and perpetrators remain in conflict. And Naropa, given Naropa's history, I note that the Tibetan people who have offered so much to the contemplative practitioners in the West, and of course, whose wisdom, discipline, and compassion embodied the founding of Naropa, remain under great pressure to abandon their own heritage and be assimilated into another. If the essential message offered in 1963 by Dr. King was meaningful then, it has to be inseparable from our core today. What he said, among the many other things in that address, was, "We have come to this hallowed ground to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism." It's not my role to criticize the political choices that anyone has made, but I do think it's important to speak and act in the face of the pain, confusion, and insecurity, and do what I can so that Naropa can be a safe container, fearless in naming aggression when present, and protective to those who are struggling. My recent letter to the community was as clear as could be about the status of the two main areas of federal policy concerns that we are hearing about. One is the effect of the proposed freeze on many sources of federal funding, and I know that that impacts many, many people in this room. Right now, as you probably know, the freezes are on hold because of some federal court action, but the reality is nobody knows how long that will last, what other strategies the administration will try to use, or the ultimate outcome, and so we are in a groundless moment. We know that Pell Grants and federal work-study funding was meant to be exempt from the freeze after finally officials were pressed to make that statement, but there's no clarity. There's no clarity as to what will happen with federal loans, with research grants, and with other funding. And as we learn more from our contacts in the higher ed world, we'll share that information. We're actively lobbying our elected officials as well, but the reality is that this has got to be a nationwide movement. What Naropa can do directly and individually is to be part of a much greater whole, and that's the work that we are doing now. I have some hope that the impact on higher education, students, and institutions across the country, because that will affect both Democrats and Republicans in all 50 states, may help to temper or eliminate the threats to some extent. As many of you know, like thousands of other colleges, Naropa is very reliant on tuition funded by federal grants and loans. There's no practical way for us to quickly substitute other sources of revenue should some significant and abrupt amount of those funds be eliminated. I want to say that, to be honest, not to create panic, but in the face of very little information, I also can't offer false promises that there'll be a seamless reaction to whatever federal action is taken. We're also closely tracking the federal demonization of diversity, equity, and inclusion work inside and outside the government. These actions are broader in impact now, but are not new, actually. For many years, aspects of DEI strategies have been challenged. You may know that in 2016, Title IX was changed by the first Trump administration to make it a more formal and trial-like process. It was changed back by the Biden administration to allow more flexibility and a more mediated process, but just Monday, changed back by the new Trump administration. So this is the yo-yo world that we're living in. Use of race and ethnicity in admissions decisions has been complex over the years, and last June, the US Supreme Court deemed using those criteria as unacceptable. They didn't quite say it was unacceptable. They gave little magic words and code words, which made it even more irritatingly difficult to figure out what to do. We now can make economic struggles as a proxy for race and ethnicity application reviews. We can encourage applicants to describe, quote, how race affected their lives, as is that's the way to address the oppression that peoples in minority communities in this country have experienced for generations. These limitations now, however, seem like a kind of quaint tip of the iceberg compared to what the wholesale elimination of DEI training across the federal government and institutions reliant on federal funding are perhaps facing. We'll also meet any pressure to negatively impact the undocumented members of our community in the narrowest possible way. So far, we haven't had any requests and no government visits, but the future is unclear. No staff or faculty member at Naropa is going to be expected to act on their own or be on their own if contacted by government officials seeking information or access. And if anyone is contacted in that way, I ask you to contact my office as quickly as possible so that we can strategize with you in terms of whatever response we need. Unlike our much larger neighbor just up the hill, we don't have a Naropa Police Department to try and keep federal agents out of our buildings without the proper warrants or the like. But we will do what we need to in terms of working with Naropa's lawyers promptly to resist in any way that we possibly can. We'll do everything we can to meet our mission, vision, and values, to honor and protect our students, faculty, and staff, and to continue to aspire to an increasingly diverse community. It has not been easy for a long time. It's going to be harder now, but with the work that we are doing as a community, we will continue to make progress. I'm pretty confident in that. I'd like nothing more than to leave you with an increased level of confidence and relaxation, but I can't do it. What I can say is that we are very engaged. We're remaining acutely aware of what's happening. We're staying in close contact across the board with the associations, with the elected officials, with the friends that we have in policy areas and so on. And all we can say now is that we'll share what we learn, and we'll take the steps that we need, that we can take, to try and blunt the edge of this potential devastating set of policies. No, I don't mean devastating only for Naropa, but for higher education broadly. As I said, it's sort of hard for me to not be upset that we had to spend this last 10 minutes talking about these policy issues, which to me are antithetical to our mission and our values, and don't really get to the heart of what Naropa faculty, students, and staff are so diligently doing and have been doing for 50 years, but that's today's reality. And let me say, we'll be happy, I hope, that we'll have some time for Q&A at the end of this presentation, and I will invite anyone on Zoom to put questions in the chat. We will save them and monitor them, and anybody live in the room that has a question that you would like answered, to send it to the Office of the President email address, and we'll make sure that I or one of my colleagues gets a response to you. So this is not the only opportunity to raise these questions, because they're all big conversations. Let's talk about the other significant activities that are defining much of this current semester. So first is the progress of the presidential search. Came to my attention that the average tenure for a small college president has declined from 8.5 years in 2006 to about 5 years today. And while we don't do a lot of math at Naropa, I realize that 2025 minus 2012 means that I've been in this job for 13 years, so against the grain. I've been blessed with the opportunity to serve Naropa and to work with our remarkable Board of Trustees, the staff and the faculty and students, and to be able to engage since 2012. I've been asked a few times what it's going to feel like to leave unfinished business when I leave this job. And I kind of realized as I was thinking about that how really sad it would be if I wasn't able to create a long list of incomplete work in progress to turn over to a new body of leaders. And that's something that I look forward to actually creating. You may know that the board hired the search division of the organization, the Association of Governing Boards, which specializes in supporting higher education institutions. And the consultant that was assigned to our search, Dr. Richard Wust, is the consultant that's managing our search. Dick has a long career in higher education, including serving as president of Adams State University in Colorado, so he has some familiarity with Colorado, and was the vice president of Heritage University, which is a Hispanic serving institution located on the Yakima Reservation in Washington. So he also has understood how to work in institutions that serve underserved populations. The search committee, which is comprised of the board, the staff, faculty, and students, is working. Their work continues. Applications are being accepted. We have a number, and we have until the end of February to get that number times, I hope, several. So if search updates and plan schedules are on the search page of the Naropa website, you can check there for more details. But I can say that we've received applications from a variety of interested and interesting applicants. I'm not on the search committee, which is totally the right thing to do, but I have a sense of what's going on in the atmosphere. There is still ample time, however, for anyone you may know, yourselves or someone else, to apply for consideration. There's time between now and the end of the month, and I can assure you that the committee and then the board will look very seriously at candidates with a variety of life experiences. Those career paths could be in higher education, which would be great, and they also could be from other areas of activity over a professional life. The challenges and opportunities for the new president to lead our community in linking the Naropa heritage with this fast-changing environment that's defining our next half-century is great. My colleagues and I agree that we want an exciting candidate with commitment to the mission, strategic vision for the future, and an ability to invite the best of the exceptional people in the academic and administrative leadership at Naropa. A shortlisted group of candidates will be invited to visit us later this spring, and they'll be built in time to engage the community. I'd urge you all to participate as much as you can when you have an opportunity to connect with these candidates. The second major event this spring is the visit on April 14th to 16th of a visiting team from the Higher Learning Commission. Yay. This is the regularly scheduled review to reaffirm our application for continued status as an accredited university. A very comprehensive self-study addressing the key areas of interest and concern to the HLC will be submitted in about 5 weeks. There's a refined draft that's about to be released to some readers. We have a consultant that's working with us on the HLC, and I can talk a little bit more about that in a second. But we will be doing a review and taking another run of edits to get this self-study. After our stalwart accreditation coordinator, Aaron McNeil, left for his doctoral studies at Northwestern a few months ago, we were fortunate to be able to hire Dr. Bruce Petrie, who is the Senior Director of Assessment, Accreditation, and Program Initiatives. Bruce has led and participated in accreditation self-studies and visits and has served as a Higher Learning Commission peer reviewer for more than 15 years. So he's of the cloth of the HLC, and we're very happy to be able to tap his wisdom as we're getting ready for the visit. Bruce is working directly with our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Jeffrey Pethybridge, and the other senior leaders and their teams in admission, development, finance, mission culture, and inclusive community, and regulatory compliance. The whole team is very engaged. One specific request to the students in the room is that on February 12th, a student survey will be accessible to you. The survey responses go directly to the HLC, and it's really their opportunity. They'll hear from you in person, but by that time, they're sort of in the middle of a very packed visit. This will give them an opportunity to gauge student views about Naropa, positive views, challenging views, but to give them a sense of your experience at Naropa. I know that the relationship with the HLC is not always clear. So let me say, the process is meant to be collegial and generative. The HLC is not in the business of looking for ways to cancel accreditation. And obviously that aligns very well with our desire to continue the status that we've held for more than 40 years. And that is something that we look forward to continuing. The report of the visiting team will identify strengths and areas for improvement, and each of such reports in the past, I think, has really provided a roadmap for future strategic decision-making. They've been helpful. These are volunteers who come from other universities, spend 2.5 days learning about an institution that in many cases they knew nothing about, and amazingly, they get to the heart of the matter. I've seen in every one of the post-visit reports that they've actually been able to pick it up. Now, that has a lot to do with the fact that people here are very willing to share a lot. And so they get it pretty quickly. The HLC does not get directive about such things as what courses we should teach, what majors we should have, or which we should sunset, if any, but rather looks at how do we assess our work against the learning outcomes that the faculty have established. How are we stewarding our resources with affirmation of our strategies and recommendations for areas that need to be improved. The third significant area of work this spring is the faculty and staff engagement with a consulting company called Mindstream. Some of you are well aware of that. A higher education consulting company that we contracted to look broadly at both the administrative and academic divisions. Mindstream was hired particularly because of the significant changes that we're experiencing at Naropa, especially around the upcoming move from this campus in a few years, which will also give the leadership of Naropa the most significant amount of investment capital that we've ever had for strategic investing. Also because of the fast changing move to more online learning, together with a stated commitment to continue residential options. There's so much change. We felt like we wanted an opportunity to have somebody from the outside take a look across divisions. So this is not focused on academics, it's not focused only on the business side, but actually integrating all of it. And Mindstream came highly recommended. The academic piece of it is being managed by a former provost at Regis University, somebody that's known Naropa for a long time and comes from a school that we feel some mission alignment with. And the non-academic side from people that have had deep higher ed administrative leadership work. Also has to be said that because of the move toward CACREP accreditation for the Graduate School of Counseling, we also have to take a look at what the impacts are going to be of becoming a CACREP accredited school and what we need to look at. So this work is early, it's underway now. We've had a few we've had a few deliverables, one notably around our IT department in areas that they've thought were strong areas that they thought we could use some changes, but we're going to be receiving all of the reports over the course of the spring. And it was very deliberate on the board's part and my colleagues' part to have the Mindstream work together with the HLC self-study, together with the presidential search be integrated so that we weren't working sort of out of sync. The work will include recommendations for new academic programs, needs, areas of growth for continuing professional education and other non-degree types of learning. In the past, we've worked with consultants that have been more narrowly focused on the areas that I described, like IT, marketing, and the like, but the appeal of Mindstream was the fact that we felt that they could integrate across our divisions. Their work is going to be a roadmap for the faculty, board, and administrative leadership, together with current and former students, to consider as we adopt some, decline some, modify some. The decisions are ours to make. This is not, we're not going to basically take this Mindstream report, turn it over to somebody and say, now implement. Our work will just begin when they finish their engagement. We think that Mindstream has the time and the skills to assess and present a series of options, and as I said, we timed the work so that it would all happen during this very fertile time this spring. Let me offer a few words about the sale of the Arapahoe campus. I've offered a fair amount before, but I know that not everybody lives the project as I do, and so I think if some of this feels a bit repetitive, that's fine. Hopefully it will just remind us of where we are today. I started a conversation that was meant to look at a sustainable future for Naropa with the trustees and the Executive Leadership Council about 18 months or 24 months ago. That was linked to an assessment of Naropa in a post-pandemic, mid-21st century world as we were sharpening our focus on the 50th anniversary. We were emerging from the pandemic as a university with many decisions to make. Unlike the vast majority of other small colleges in the country, we did not furlough a single staff or faculty member despite enrollment and donation declines during the pandemic. That was a financially very costly decision, but I thought, and the board agreed, an essential one, mission aligned, and it was important for us to do what we could to continue to allow the faculty and staff to feel supported. It's very important to note that in the past 10 years, 500 small colleges have closed in the United States. So hold that for a minute. It's a lot. Looking closely, we saw that in many cases, those schools closed with significant assets, mostly real estate, that, from my point of view, could have been deployed in ways that would lead to a more desirable outcome, different conclusion. It'd be totally arrogant for me or for us as a university to try and put ourselves in the shoes of the leadership of those other schools because every one of them has a unique story. So I'm not pretending that if I had been at Goddard, I would have kept Goddard open. That's not what we're saying. But the fact of the matter is that we are also in the same situation that a lot of those schools without large endowments, very reliant on tuition, we're facing, except we have the great good fortune of also having significant assets in the form of our real estate. Naropa was fortunate going back all 50 of our years to have nurtured a base of generous donors whose gifts allowed us to purchase this campus, as well as Nalanda and the former Paramita campuses. Coupled with the significant increase in the value of Boulder real estate, we have had an opportunity before us. It's a fact that over the years, the city of Boulder, with mostly good intentions, I think, have made development on this campus almost impossibly complex and expensive. This is driven in large part because of the proximity to Boulder Creek and the floodplain, which continues because of climate change, I would say, in addition to other things, to extend, so that now even the Snowline apartments are kind of on the edge of a floodplain, which 20 years ago I think people would have said was a mistake in the mapping. It's not. The only economically feasible development on this campus, and this is purely economics, is a revenue-intensive one, such as housing. That's not something Naropa is in the business to do, and it became clear that for us, what we could do on this campus would be to nibble around the edges of repairing a leaky roof or fixing a foundation, but the notion of actually doing anything significant here was going to be economically impossible. I can say that the Chicago-based Core Spaces company, which is the company that we selected to sell the property to, they're the same ones that built the new building where the old Liquor Mart was on 15th and Canyon, and also the former Best Western Hotel out a little bit to our east, felt like of the four companies that we looked at to be the most sensitive to the importance of this campus. What I can say now is that for sure the Lincoln School will be preserved, and the landscaping is built around the sycamores as central to the landscaping plan, which is not something they'd be required to do, but I made clear was going to be the key to the board agreeing to sell to them. There's a lot going on with Core. They are working now with the city planning staff. We didn't want to work with a company that didn't have Boulder experience, because working in development in Boulder is not for the faint of heart, and we wanted an entity that had significant experience and some credibility with the planners, which Core does. The campus sale is not the only step that we've taken to create a financially sustainable Naropa. Over the years, we've reduced the long-term debt owed by Naropa from about $12 million in 2012 when I first arrived to about $3.5 million today, a significant decrease in our long-term debt. And we were able to do it while still controlling what's today about $45 million worth of real estate assets. So it's an opportunity before us, and I am not diminishing the emotional tie to this campus, the difficulty experienced by many in the move by any means, but it also, from my point of view, was the most significant way in which we could move toward a sustainable next 50 years. We've moved from a budget that just after COVID had fairly large deficits to one that this year and going forward are moving to a much more sustainable one. This is a result of enrollment growth over the past 2 years, another place where we have pushed against the tide. Our enrollment has grown, and that's thanks to Anne-Marie Klotz, Kelly, Karen Wills, the entire admissions team, and the faculty who have done so much work to interview and to speak with students. And so our enrollment has grown over the last couple of years by close to 30%, which is a statistic that is not really believed when we have these conversations with peers. And so it's a really important message. We're also becoming a little bit less reliant on tuition revenue through increased fundraising. I'll say a little bit more about that, but there is still clearly a lot more to do for an institution that is not sitting on a massively large endowment. Notably, as we celebrate our 50 years, we're the recipients of the generosity of donors whose giving has increased as they themselves have earned more or they've inherited more. That's just the sort of rhythm of this university. All the folks that showed up in their 20s in 1974 didn't have a lot necessarily, and over the past 5 decades, people's success has been, at least in material terms, has been manifest, and their generosity toward Naropa remains. A few months ago, for example, we received a bequest of $900,000 from a recently deceased donor who I started working with 10 years ago when she was just beginning to have a notion that Naropa would be one of the areas for her philanthropy on her death. And at that time, we and she was thinking it would be $100,000 or $150,000 in gift, and we assumed that she'd live for many years, and she did live for 10 more years, but because just economics, it was $900,000 when we received the funding a couple of months ago. We were also gifted a $1 million property in Seattle from another donor who died in the fall, whose connection, I think about it when I'm in this room, his connection goes all the way back to his work as the manager of PAC 45 years ago, and it will now, he's now left us a remarkable legacy. Our longevity also means that the pool of generous donors is continuing to increase. This year alone has seen the total number of donors grow from 500 to 750, with 5 months more remaining in this current fiscal year. So that will be a much bigger number by the time we end our year in June. Many have felt more engaged. This is my second shout out to Kelly. Many have felt more engaged in large part because of Kelly's work in her role as the Alumnus Affairs Director. Generosity cannot be taken for granted, and deepening the connection to our graduates is essential work. It pays in many, many ways, money only being one. Going back to the campus sale, as Naropa moves closer now to about 50% of our students' community engaging through fully or hybrid online courses, an assessment of the physical campus needs was possible and necessary. We remain committed to a residential experience for students, but what we mean by campus, what we need by bricks and mortar, is something which is a wide open question. Many of you know, and I hope some of you joined, a recently formed campus transition committee made up of faculty, staff, and students who will be looking at all the space and resource issues in order to take best advantage of the resources that are going to be made available to us. After the sale of this campus, which is likely going to be in early 2027, so about 2 years from now, and the move in 2029, Naropa will have a greater than $20 million pool of investment capital to create program offerings, improve staff and faculty compensation, and hold tuition increases to as low a number as possible. The board and the senior leadership have been clear from the beginning and are fully committed to not using those funds to cover operating deficits. The expectation is the budget will be balanced, but rather to use this money in a 21st century future. Nothing is off the table, though. In addition to funding the launch of new programs or enhancing the ones we have now, we could build another building at the Nalanda campus. It's physically possible to do that. We could acquire some additional space elsewhere if that's what we need. And that goes back to the question of what do we mean by a campus. Some of what we mean by a campus is more like a media center than it is for supporting the online students as it is the bricks and mortar of a classroom and faculty offices. All of those things have to be looked at. Or we could determine that there are more efficient ways to use the current Nalanda building and allow that to serve us while we invest the funds in other ways. I will note, because it's been something I've paid attention to for 20-some years, in preparation for the more intensive use of the Nalanda campus, we were able to complete a live relocation of the Nalanda prairie dog colony to a far better site, 40,000 acres in southern Colorado. So think of it as like your grandmother moving to Florida or something like that, but instead of being surrounded by railroad tracks, concrete, Arapahoe Avenue with speeding cars, they're now on 40,000 acres east of Pueblo, hopefully basking in the sun right now. Those of you that are at Nalanda or have driven by will note that we've graded the site and we've put up temporary fencing as a current deterrent. It's never permanent, but a current deterrent for prairie dogs to kind of take up residence again. A much more carefully designed site plan will emerge. I had a lot of fun in December with Stephen's permaculture class, where one of the projects they took was developing ideas for what the Nalanda campus would look like. Some of them were incredibly wonderfully off the wall, and some played more to my pragmatic side, and I actually thought, we should start with the other. But it was great work, and I think gave us the opportunity to take a look at the kinds of things that we can do. One very specific thing that we are doing sooner rather than later is the tea house will have a new home at the Nalanda campus, and we're working now on the right location for that there. A little bit tricky because we don't want to put it in a place where it might have to get moved yet again, but we're working on that, and that's under Charlotta and the Center for the Advancement of Contemplative Education are working with our architects and designers to figure out the right space for that. There's a lot more to report on than we have time to cover today, but let me note some other areas that are important to our work together. Naropa Core faculty, as we all know, hold great responsibility not just meeting their central role as classroom teachers, but in serving as academic leaders, department chairs, and offering other forms of university service of all sorts. In addition to working with the very real need for competitive compensation, including maintaining, as we have since it was launched, sabbatical opportunities for faculty, not something that's always offered at schools our size. Cauldron, the Faculty Senate, and Jeffrey as the Chief Academic Officer have also looked at other areas where we could provide support. One was the restoration of funding to the faculty for professional development, the ability to go to conferences and that sort of thing, which had been suspended for a time around COVID. And the other was the creation of a research grant project, which I was pretty excited about. The first grant to 9 faculty members were awarded recently, and they're not massive, but they will allow the faculty to go down 9 areas of inspiration and passion that they have, and really pleased that this faculty-driven initiative was something that we could fund. As is also the case nationally, a considerable percentage of our credits are taught by adjunct faculty who have their own unique issues to address. They don't have a university service obligation because they're basically paid on a per credit taught basis. That amount has moved, but it hasn't moved fast enough. And that is something that, because of the significant reliance that we, like other schools, have on adjuncts, need to put more effort into. And in this current budget period that we're working on, we're taking a hard look at how we can make yet another step. We have started, however, over the last few years to offer adjuncts stipends so that they can, if they are interested in participating on search committees for new faculty, in developing new courses, particularly our online courses, and the like, so that their voices can be heard, and then there's not an expectation that that's supposed to be something they do out of the goodness of their hearts as their sort of philanthropy to Naropa. So that is something that was important, has been important for a while, and we're continuing to do that. Cauldron and also the Student Union, SUN, have met with our CFO, Spencer Conroy, to review financial statements and budgets. It's something I've said before. I will say with a little more confidence now that these conversations have now started to get embedded into a regular rhythm of communication. I think that's a hugely important step. I am grateful to both Cauldron and the SUN's leadership for being at the table, for very productive time together, for open and honest questions, and for also taking great efforts, I think, to understand the challenges broadly that Naropa is experiencing. This is the first academic year, as those of you in the Graduate School of Counseling know, that we are delivering a basically K-CREP aligned curriculum. This is the first essential step toward applying for K-CREP accreditation, and was the result of the sort of amazing effort of Dean Linda Black, who, as you know, retired in the summer, but also the GSC faculty. The next and most sort of threshold challenge is now to continue to hire K-CREP credentialed faculty. It's a complex mathematical calculation, but it's been underway for some time and will continue this year. We've continued to budget to be able to bring in the faculty that we're required to bring in. Don't have time to get into the K-CREP weeds today, but I think it's crucial to note that K-CREP accreditation, which is separate from the HLC, so just so that you know, it's specifically for counselor education. Years ago, it was an option. It didn't really affect us because we were able to ensure students from around the country that a degree from Naropa and the Naropa curriculum would be seen as equivalent to the K-CREP accredited education, and students could basically sit for licensure, maybe needing 3 or 4 more credits in some particular area. Those days are gone. The list of states from which we cannot accept GSE applications now is fast growing, more than 20. Even if a student quite honestly says, well, I'm not going back to Missouri to practice, we can't take the risk because we've had other students who have said that and ended up going back to Missouri and then are unhappy that they can't get licensed. So we just can't take that chance. So the pressure on the admissions team and the faculty to bring in a sufficient number of students in an increasingly competitive market is terrific. Thankfully, Colorado, which is our single source of applicants, still has not yet made a K-CREP requirement, and because we are in close contact with the state, I don't see it happening that quickly, but things could change. Mission culture and inclusive community, the team of MCIC has offered very well organized Wednesday town halls. I know many of you have participated. They've been topical, they've allowed for breakouts, they've been edgy in various ways, which I think has been incredibly important. The other thing that MCIC has done was facilitated the hiring of 3 very important new additions to Naropa fellows that we have. One, Monica Mueller, who is the Joanna Macy Center Residential Fellow, is here. Yay. One, Ian Sanderson, who is the Earth Guardian Fellow. And Eileen O'Shaughnessy is the Nuclear Guardian Fellow. So I would encourage you all to find ways to connect with these 3 incredibly skilled and visionary leaders who we'd love to think are going to be here forever, but they may not. So this is your moment to take advantage of that. On April 18th to 20th, the Joanna Macy Center for Resilience and Regeneration is presenting a conference entitled Reconnecting for a Just and Regenerative Future. Cannot imagine a more timely moment for this conference, partially because it'll be 48 hours after we say goodbye to the HLC visiting team, which I will be extremely excited to do, but also with everything else that we talked about today. Given where we are with climate change, attacks on civil society, the timeliness is sort of exquisite. Joanna Macy is 95 years old. She has never given up focusing our attention on learning from the past and generating a just future for generations to come, generations to whom we will just be distant memories. Joanna blessed Naropa with her name and her body of work, and it's our honor and our obligation to fully manifest the gift. And the fellows that I just described are one area of expressing gratitude to Joanna for her generosity toward us. I also want to note with gratitude one of our student colleagues, Zachary Alden, who has developed a chapter of the Student Veteran Association at Naropa. Naropa had a notable presence at the SVA's national conference. Veterans are an increasingly important part of our student body, and I'm pleased that they're motivated not just to organize, but also to share how a contemplative approach to education can be of value to veterans who often have not been well supported following their service. One crucial reason that our growth in online learning has succeeded has been because of the very careful and creative use of a 5-year federal Title III grant, I can't believe I'm saying that, for a total of $2.2 million, which we received in 2022. Those funds, managed by many, but led by Mary McHenry, the Senior Director of Innovative Teaching and Learning, and her team, will have created, in collaboration with the faculty, more than 80 asynchronous online courses supporting 4 undergraduate majors in psychology, art therapy, environmental studies, and interdisciplinary studies, and 3 minors in yoga, leadership, and psychedelic studies. The results are dramatically more than was expected by the grant agreement, and the kind of evidence that if this kind of support disappears, the losers are going to be the great numbers of students and faculty who are going to benefit from the success that our Title III team has had, and so yet another reason that we need to resist. So finally, let me say a few words about psychedelic studies and psychedelic-assisted therapy. About 3 years ago, some faculty members at Naropa advocated for the launch of a Center for Psychedelic Studies. Since then, we've trained more than 400 postgraduate clinicians in this emerging field. We've developed an international reputation for the quality of our programs. We became certified by both the states of Oregon and Colorado to offer facilitator training in the therapeutic use of psilocybin. And as noted before, we launched a BA minor in psychedelic studies. For reasons that are too detailed and frankly too painful to go into, this fall Naropa, along with a lot of other entities in the psychedelic therapy space, started experiencing complications from the insurance world. And in our case, it meant that our insurers, and insurance for a university, as you can imagine, is an essential. It's not an option. Our insurers said that as long as we were continuing to do work through the center that was other than pure academics, which meant the BA was safe, so to speak, that they were not going to renew our coverage. This was after 6 months of assurance from one of the largest brokerages in the country that we have worked with for years that it would be a solvable problem. It was not only not solvable, it was not solvable at the 11th hour. And so we were at a position where we were scrambling, change brokers, much more to it. I need a drink to go into it more. Change brokers, and we're able to put new insurance together. However, the trade-off for doing that was an abrupt need to spin off an independent entity to continue doing the training work that we were doing for postgraduate clinicians, for the facilitators in psilocybin training, and certainly and anything else that we were going to do along those lines. We had always intended to create an independent entity at some point because we knew that so long as these natural medicines were not federally legal, we could not open a clinic to be able to make use of the medicines, and so we knew we would need to separate it from Naropa at some point. What we did not know and did not plan for was basically the fact that on Friday we had a Naropa Center for Psychedelic Studies, and on Monday it needed to be a separate standalone entity. And so several of us spent how you spent your Christmas vacation. This is how we spent our Christmas vacation, was putting together the new entity. The 13 or so staff from Naropa who moved over to the new entity called the Memoru Center for Visionary Healing, Memoru being an Esperanto word meaning to remember, partnered with 3 of the leading therapists in the psychedelic therapies field, 2 of whom are Naropa graduates, and have created this new nonprofit, which is now building itself. The speed of the evolution was unexpected, and a great gratitude is offered by me to the team for working both with the fact that they were personally suddenly groundless because they worked for Naropa and then they didn't, and that they remained firmly committed to the emerging mental health options that Naropa was justifiably seen as leading in working with natural medicines. We're continuing to do as much as we can to help Memoru launch while allowing us to remain properly insured, which is protecting our entire community. And so the outcome ended up being the outcome that we needed. The process was not a great one. But I believe that over time, Memoru is going to be a massively important factor in this emerging ecosystem, and if people view Memoru as having been birthed at Naropa, that would be a very good thing, and I will continue to encourage that to happen. In conclusion, let me acknowledge, and I know most of you read, or many of you have read what I wrote last week. I want to acknowledge the death last week of Bill McKeever. Bill, who was an early co-executive director of the Naropa Institute, and whose foundational work was really a significant reason that we're in this room today, died after a 28-year journey with Parkinson's disease. And I mention it both because I think it's important to honor our pioneers, but also, if you read my note to the community, you'll see this quote that I wrote from the very first accrediting team when we became candidates for accreditation. I think that quote bears repeating because of the challenges that we've just talked about and the great promises that are before us. So the team was led by the president of a business college, and I guarantee you if the teams these days don't really know what they're doing when they found Naropa, I guarantee you in 1982 they had no idea. We frequently would get Christian theologians because it was the best that the accrediting body could figure out. In this case, he wasn't that, he was a business guy. But what he ended up writing, and this is what got presented to the then, it was not called the Higher Learning Commission, but the predecessor. What they wrote was this: despite all rational arguments to the contrary, the team has faith in the future of Naropa. Naropa has to be seen to be believed. The team has seen it and believes it. So what was true in 1982 for me remains true today. Everyone who brought us here and everyone participating today are owed debts of gratitude for keeping the pilot light lit for 50 years and to keep it brightly shining today. This may well be my last State of the University. We'll see. If it is, good. And if not, I will see you next winter. But happy to have a conversation. So thank you all very much.